We're joined by a very, very special guest in David Grubb of Hard in the Paint and the Bird Rights. I'm sure you guys have seen him on various platforms, heard his voice in the press conferences. Welcome, welcome, David Grubb. How you doing, man?
It's funny you said that about the press conferences because that's usually where I hear the most from people is like, Grubb, you tried to take over the press conference again? Yeah, I guess I did.
Look, these questions need to be asked.
We
There's
need
only so
MVPs
many
like you.
times you can be like, "Well, coach, what'd you make of the game?" And it's it's not a real question.
But I'm excited to be on with you guys. We have never done this before. Schmidt and I obviously talk every game pretty much. If he's in the building, we're going to be right next to each other chatting it up. But we all know each other from via social media and dealing with this franchise. So it's great to be on with you guys and so much to talk about.
Absolutely.
Dealing with this franchise. Yep, that's the right way to put it.
Why can't we talk about playoff basketball? I won't talk about
no,
playoff basketball.
Embargo on real basketball talk until this franchise is serious about playing real basketball. I'm gonna hit the intro video. I think some of the chats already started rolling in, but I forgot to do that. So let me do that right now.
The New Orleans Pelicans select Zion Williamson.
Holiday, the dribble penetration. So tough going to the goal. High above the rim to rip it down.
There is a lot of Zion in that intro video that we're probably gonna have to change in about a month or so.
Oh.
Let's get right to it. Tanner, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. I think what we're gonna talk about Zion here in a second. Let's kind of like catch up on what's happened over the last couple of days, and we'll get right into like what some of that stuff means. And for the people that are watching and tuning in right now at the end of your workday, really appreciate you. It's going to be some kind of special dedication to stick with this, despite everything that has gone on with this. So, Grubb, they made the Joe Dumars hire official. I know we had chatted. The last we chatted was at the final game, and I think we were discussing what this means because it was at that point kind of known to everybody that Griff was on his way out. But they've gone ahead. They've hired Joe Dumars, made it official. Oh my goodness. We gotta address this. Appreciate you, Michael Morgan. Why the hell doesn't Dumars have mandates so weak? I assume the question is why does Dumars have mandates? And well, Grubb, let me pitch that one over to you.
I mean, that's this organization, whether it's on the Saints side, I mean, clearly, or whether it's on the Pelicans side, it's the brain trust of Mickey Loomis, Gail Benson. I don't know how much she is involved with the decision and just deferring to the other guys, but Dennis Lauscha and them. It's clear that they want to have their fingerprints over every part of this of these organizations. And I think at some point you've got to let the basketball side be the basketball side. You are not experienced in this. This is not what they do. This is not where their training has been. And you've got to allow. So, like, to me, the first thing is whether it's Joe Dumars or whomever they could have hired. You have to allow that person to assess the organization from the inside before you issue any mandates. And then the other part of that is whatever your position is, when you make it public like this, when you allow this stuff to get out, you've diminished your position. You are now operating from a position of weakness, whether it's dealing with Zion Williamson himself when he comes back into the building, or if it's dealing with the other 29 teams in this league and trying to get better. They all know what you're really about. And I think that this is just further exposure to that ownership group and just how out of touch they are with running a basketball organization in the 21st century.
100%. And even before they get to Zion and the mandates, it certainly seems like a condition of Dumars taking on the job. Like the offer is not that you're running the basketball operations of the Pelicans. The offer is you're running the basketball operations of the Pelicans, and you're keeping the head coach, and you got to trade time. That is the offer, take it or leave it. And certainly seems like Dumars took. He took it. It doesn't seem like he took it. He took it. It's official. It's in writing. The press conference is next week. The fact that it all happened so quickly. What does that say to you, Grubb? Like, how did they get to this hiring so quickly after the firing?
Well, I mean, I think you laid it out really well that you go when you start this in after Griffin basically goes to the front office and says he wants to move on from Willie Green, which I think we all thought after the new year would have been the time to move on from Willie Green. I mean, I think that was broad speculation that we thought once 2025 hit, with the Pelicans being out of it, that it was time to get a new head coach. And we certainly heard rumblings at that time that James Borrego was ready to move over and see what he could salvage of, just even if it meant trying to play a different style of basketball and see if that worked, whether Borrego was the long-term solution or not, just see if different approach would have been effective. But no, they made their choice that it was about personalities rather than production. They didn't like the way Griff was handling his business, and Willie Green was far more deferential in that regard. And then when you talk about who's cheaper to get rid of, yeah, Willie Green at $2 million. I like paying Willie Green $2 million if you're the New Orleans Pelicans, because that's far below the going rate for a good head coach in this league. And if David Griffin was going to do an external search, he was going to probably have to bring in someone who was going to make $7 million per year, because that's where coaching is now. The top 20 coaches in the league are getting about $7 million a year. And the Pelicans have no interest in paying that. So this, to me, you flirted with Joe Dumars 6 years ago before you hired David Griffin, and then you go through the situation where somebody is doing radically different things than maybe you would have done. He's not part of the clique in that office, which has proven to be the most influential thing you can be, whether it's Dennis Allen or whomever. It's the same business. If you're not in with these people, then you're not going to be around a very long time. If you're not part of that program, you're not going to stick around. And whether or not we think David Griffin did a great job, he wasn't part of the family. And so it's a lot easier to move on from that guy who's bothering you in that regard, maybe asking for too much, maybe saying, hey, we need to do this, we need to add more people to the staff in the front office. We need to do these things. I want to get rid of these players. And they're not here to hear that. So if that's the case, and you make this decision with somebody who's amenable to all your demands, who's going to basically maintain the status quo while also doing the other parts, and I think that the big part of Griff not being blowing his public relations side his first 3 years, and that hole, as you're trying to get a new arena maybe, or you're trying to get a new downtown practice facility, it's a lot easier to walk Joe Dumars through Baton Rouge and the halls and trying to get the state legislature to provide those funds than it is to have David Griffin, an outsider, do that. You have Joe Dumars, Louisiana Basketball Hall of Famer, Louisiana, all these things that he can do. He can be the guy who takes your slings and arrows for you. And you also put a black face on it in a majority black city where you think that you can get people to disregard these things because of that. And I think that that's a little self-serving there as well.
I think that's that's really well put. And I think you're bringing up the points about it kind of being a clique and being the in-persons or not. Mason and Jeremy, just want to pitch it to you guys, because that's not, I guess, unique behavior to the Pelicans. You kind of see it all throughout professional sports. We've seen it in the NBA, we've seen it in other organizations. But how can you navigate some of, like, I don't want to call it nepotism necessarily, but it kind of is nepotism. But how do you navigate this? Like, okay, well, the familiarity with the people that bring in the people while also having a good enough process to maintain the integrity of your operations, to still progress towards becoming, New Orleans is never going to be a destination team, but be a team that, people get to and be like, yeah, you know what, things are really well done around here, despite what everyone else says. Like, this is a really solid spot.
I don't think they want that. I don't think they care about that. As much as we can talk about it, they don't care about that. Grubb nailed it, especially at the end, man. This hire is really testing my sensibilities. Like, as much as I want to give them credit for hiring a black person, and this is a black head coach, and for now a black second in command, and as much as I tout this as equality for a quote unquote failing upward, man, this ain't nothing but a black face on a big problem. This is what this is. This is a Louisiana black man in Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame that you can put to this black city and say, look, he's going to do everything we want. So I don't want this. Joe Dumars, the person, the man, this is nothing against you. You are their face. You are answering the number one question of an executive. Make them keep the job. And you're willing to say yes to make them keep the job. And for that, man, it just all smells foul to me, man.
Only thing I got to add is it just feels like they're done trying. It feels like they gave it their best shot with Griff. They found a guy who had a ton of respect around the league, and we were surprised wanted the job here, even with the Zion piece. And so they tried that. They're like, oh, we tried it the right way, or the way that people think we're supposed to do it. It didn't work, and now we're here, so we're just going to go back to doing it our way. And if we win, cool. But if not, we still got the Pelicans that they've appreciated 10x since we bought the team. And whatever happens, happens. And that's and it's an insult to the fan base, quite frankly.
Yeah. Do you guys? This is just for everybody. Do you guys think he's being set up to fail?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like when you come on anybody who takes a job like this under these kinds of parameters, whether it's a mandate of keeping a coach, whether it's a mandate, like we saw this with Griff. You know what I'm saying? You start with that mandate of keeping Alvin Gentry, even though Alvin didn't want to stay. Like that's the part that kills me about that going back is Alvin didn't even want to stay. He was ready to go. He made his goodbyes. And then you still do this. What you're saying is this is just money to us. This is not about winning. This is a cash asset for us where we get to get this money, and all we have to do. I mean, look, Donald Sterling did this for 20 years, right, with the Los Angeles Clippers, where he figured out I don't have to win, and I can still make money in this league because of TV revenue, because I'm in Los Angeles, because of these things. I can just be mediocre, occasionally make the playoffs. Every few years, the Clippers would make the playoffs, whether it was with Ron Harper and that crew, and then you blow it up, send those guys out, you get another number 1 draft pick, you get people excited, they want to buy the jerseys again, you stink for 4 years, and then you start the process all over again. They are selling hope in small enough intervals to keep people around just long enough to sell some more tickets. And so, yeah, it's doomed to failure because if the ultimate approach is you're not working towards building a champion, if that's not your stated goal every day, because those owners will make the mistake of doing certain things, of going too far in the pursuit of winning. But if all you're doing is just trying to keep things going, then nobody can succeed in a situation like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and like I want to be able to give Joe Dumars the benefit of the doubt. Like when I reach out to people across the league, like everyone has great things to say about him as a person. Like he's like everyone gets along with him. It's people who worked under him in the past are like, no, like he was really enjoyable to work under, and I buy this idea that he brings credibility, that he brings respect. But the problem is that credibility and respect is being yanked away from him by people above him, right? Like whatever credibility and respect he's bringing, it's there to paper over the mess that's behind him. And look, I've said this multiple times to a few people that I've talked to like the last couple of days, but like the bar for the Pelicans over the last decade, 12 years, how long this ownership group has been there, has been so low that it's not unreasonable to think that Joe Dumars is going to come in here and with a moderate amount of luck, a moderate amount of normal health levels, he is going to succeed in having a better tenure than the previous 2 leaders. I mean, like David Griffin was given all of these resources by ownership that Dell Demps never had, and I think he finished his tenure, his 6 years versus Dell's final 6 years. He had a lower winning percentage than Dell Demps, right? Like that's how low the bar is, and I think by the time Demps was done with his time in New Orleans, a lot of people were very much out on his process and his set of decision making. And I don't think there were people really saying that, look, no, like Dell didn't get a fair shake in his time here. So I hope Joe gets that fair shake. I hope like whatever resources they gave Griffin, whatever checkbooks they opened up, like those don't close up. I hope that in fact it's more. I like wherever David Griffin left off. The hope is that Dumars, in his time in the NBA league office, he's seen how, like the 10,000 foot level, like how organizations are supposed to look like and how, championship orgs are structuring themselves, how small market orgs are structuring themselves. He's probably very much in tune with league trends when it comes to building out your staffs in various capacity, or at least he should have access to people who are very much in tune with that. And you would hope he brings that experience to the Pelicans and brings them to a state where I think I talked about a lot in my article. OKC is the premier example of what you want to be as a small market organization. It's not a destination. There's really not much to do in Oklahoma, but they go so far above and beyond in terms of taking care of players, taking care of players' families, taking care of staff, monetarily, making sure their medical needs are met, making sure their food needs are met on the road. Like their travel services are top notch. I mean, like everywhere you look at it, it's woven into like the fiber of their organization, and you just is everyone you talk to around this ownership group, or anyone that's had exposure to them, it's quite the opposite of that. Everyone says cheapness is woven into the fiber of the organization. Anywhere they can cut corners, that's what they look to do. And so maybe it takes someone that they're familiar with in Joe Dumars to tell them, hey man, you guys are doing it right. And maybe that's what it is. Like there's this there's this quote from Jacob Reese. They got Bucky's in OKC. Hold on.
Hey, we got.
But they have one in Lake Charles.
They got one 45 minutes away in Mississippi. We gonna get one too. It just opened up.
Hey, shout out Bucky's, man. But there's this quote from Jacob Reese, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it's about this idea of the stonecutters credo, and it's this when these stone cutters, these stonemasons, they like hit this rock 100 times, 1,000 times, and you don't see any visible changes to it, and then one blow and it splits in half, right? The Spurs have basically made this concept into their mantra, like where everything that we do, like we may not see visible change, but we're working towards a greater good. That's what their whole pound the rock mantra is about. You may think it's like corporate bullshit or whatever, and it can be, right? But if you resound with it, you resound with it. I hope Dumars gets to be the person that delivers the blow that makes things better for this organization, where his predecessors, like whatever that they've worked towards making the organization and built it up, like he gets to take advantage of that. That's the hope for me there.
Let me destroy your hope real quick. Here is the New Orleans Saints players rated the team's facilities from last year, February 28th. The weight room was a B+, good job. Head coach, B-, which maybe they were told to say that.
We see how that went.
Treatment of families, C. Oh, by the way, the B- was 29th in the NFL for the head coach. Treatment of families, 22nd with a C. Food and dining area in the city of New Orleans, 31st, a B-. That's the team they give a fuck about. That's the team they care about. And they rank low. As much as I want to say, yeah, Joe Dumars has respect and credibility, he's an NBA lifer, 2-time champion, 3-time if you include his one that he won in 2004 as an executive. As much as little grabs of hope that I want to have, it's the other dudes. It's the guys that's signing the checks. They don't care. And as much as until they care, or worst case scenario for some people around here, new ownership, which means shipping them out, I can't see the light at the end of this tunnel for longevity, for sustained success. I can't see it.
The one thing I think is interesting, I agree 100% on everything, and that they don't care. And so what does it matter? But I do think, I'm curious what level of visibility Joe Dumars has across the operations of every team in the league, because you can talk about Griff, like he saw how Cleveland, the Cavaliers operated, and how Dan Gilbert spends, but that's one team. And at some point, that's one team, 5 years ago. Like you don't know how the rest of the league works, how every other team works. Arguably, Joe Dumars has seen every team in the league and knows exactly what really good looks like and what really bad looks like. And so if there's any message he can convey to the ownership group, it's that. And I don't buy that it's going to work, but I do think that at least is an interesting way to frame the Joe Dumars hire that gives me a little bit to cling on to, that he has that kind of purview and can share that upwards. Nothing will be done with it, but at least he has that to share,
I would say this too. What's interesting is you go back into Dumars' history, the Pistons were the first team, remember, to have their own jet in the NBA. So, and he was part of that organization when that happened. And and the ownership groups that he dealt with, whether it was, as the families changed and Illich, took over downtown in Detroit and all those things, the Pistons spent money, whether it was on facilities, moving into the Palace at Auburn Hills at the time, which was the state-of-the-art facility, or moving down into Little Caesars Arena, that being a state-of-the-art facility. They've been at the forefront of having these exceptional buildings. Hopefully you can have some influence there, but if the checkbook ain't opening, what I'm saying, there's only so many things you can do. I think for me, part of the concern is like, have we ever seen in the history of the NBA somebody be out of it as an executive this long? We've seen coaches take long hiatuses, come back and do some winning. I mean, Hubie Brown was out of the league for like 15 years, came back and led the Grizzlies to 50-win seasons. But I don't know if we've seen an executive. And I think that it goes to what kind of staff is he going to build? They have these rumors about him bringing in the same kind of people he was working with at the later stage of his Pistons tenure. How does that impact, even if they retain Bryson Graham, if there starts to be a power grab amongst those people, among those who were Joe Dumars loyalists in Detroit who come to New Orleans, and there becomes a cliquish thing there between who's already here and who wasn't? I think that's, to me, a big concern too, is how does he flesh out this front office?
I think that's such a great point you bring up, because I think it allows us to kind of transition into like the next part of what we want to discuss. And I think these things are all tied together. So with regards to examples of people who've kind of been out of the game, I think the last time Dumars worked in any kind of like front office capacity was with the Kings. I think it was he was there during the year they traded Halliburton for Sabonis. So he was the chief strategy officer. I believe that was his title there. So I think he may have had a great deal of input on that move. Scott Perry was also with the Kings, who has now just been hired with the Kings. Scott Perry was also out of the game. Scott Perry had not been in a front office capacity since, I think, the King. Oh no, he left to go to the Knicks, and then after the Knicks, he didn't really do anything, right?
He ain't do anything with the Knicks.
Didn't do anything with the Knicks, right? And so he also was out of the game and had a close personal relationship with Vivek, and got his deal finalized within 24 hours of Monty McNair being let go. The situation mirrors itself. Dumars and Perry have a very close relationship. They've worked together in the past. Perry was someone that Dumars was very much interested in bringing into New Orleans in one of these roles, David, that you were talking about. Now, maybe the Kings moved on him so quickly because they had heard like, hey, like if you don't move on me now, I'm going to take the job in New Orleans. But there's a couple of other names out there that don't necessarily inspire a great deal of confidence. I've reached out. I'm not going to name names because it's not my job to like bash people, especially people that I don't know. But I will say there's some reported names out there that I've reached out to some other execs on and gotten pretty big, like, oh no, like that's not a good idea type messages. So like that doesn't give you, a ton of confidence in terms of the net that's being cast by Joe himself. And if he's bringing, let's say he only brings in 2 people, like that'd be pretty fair for him to ask for. Like I can bring in 2 people. Like Griff got to bring in Trajan and Swin, and he brought in Michael Blackstone. So I think, and then he brought in Aaron Nelson. There was like 4 people that were like high profile hires / like, quote unquote senior leadership at that point. You got to bring in 4 people. 2 is pretty fair to ask for. He doesn't have a prior relationship with Bryson Graham. Bryson Graham is, he would be the de facto number 2 under Dumars, but if he's bringing in 2 of his own people, is he really the number 2? Like, how do you feel about that one?
I don't know how to feel because, as you say, it's fair for him to ask, but if you're a small market team, you need to thrive off of the draft. Bryson has found all these gems throughout the last 4 or 5 years, starting from the Trey Murphy, Jose Alvarado, Herb Jones threesome that he brought on, and is basically the lifeblood of this team when it comes to the role players or emerging stars. Pushing him down is not going to help matters. And more importantly, why would I want to stay? And if you lose that as a small market team and you bring in people that have philosophers from yesteryear, again, as we said last week, just because it's too big don't mean y'all know what's going on in 2025 modern basketball. So it would be, in my opinion, a punishing blow if they demote or lose Bryson, because we need as many young churning young players in this. Look at OKC, man. Just look at the Spurs. They're finding gems, finding diamonds in the rough to continue to have a thriving depth. And if you take him away, man. But who am I talking about? These dudes are idiots, man. I'm not going. That's not going to happen. Go ahead, Mason.
He should walk. Like if that happens, and he gets I think he could certainly get the same position he's in as kind of like the default number 2 now, are potentially number 2 most organizations. Not all, like, you know, there are a lot of organizations.
Detroit basketball.
there's one. I may have to shift my allegiance full time.
The Kings' job itself is Wes Wilcox was their GM. Was in Bryson's role, right? And then he left to be a GM of I believe a college program, or, you know, I don't think he's doing it anymore. So now they're hiring in Scott Perry, and there's a vacant number 2 spot there. There is there's an expectation that in Phoenix, you know, James Jones is going to be out of the picture. He's not really been in any kind of decision-making capacity for the last couple of years since Ishbia got there anyway, because it's been Ishbia like 90%. And then they have Josh Barlstein over there, who, you know, it works pretty closely with Ishbia, but they still need someone in that spot. Obviously, Jeremy mentioned the Denver job, who, you know, I've heard a name to watch for that one is Minnesota's GM, Matt Lloyd. But Minnesota and New Orleans have some interesting overlaps there. Tim Connolly used to be in the New Orleans front office under Dell Demps. Dell Demps is in Minnesota right now. So, like, there's ties there to where, like, Bryson maybe could, you know, like, connect to and be like, hey, like, if Matt Lloyd gets the job in Denver, like, does Bryson just go be the number 2 over there? You know, like, so yeah. I was Mason. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Figured we could talk for a second.
No, the only other thing I wanted to bring up is, like, you talked about the draft and how well, you know, Bryson and that team has done with that. I am now worried about how much ownership is going to meddle in that process as well. You guys have to tell me about how much that happens on the Saints side of things. But I mean, all this kind of like BS around, you know, character and prioritizing, like, weird shit from them. We talked enough about that a few days ago, but you know, a little bit hypocritical shit on their end. But, like, is that a concern for y'all around, you know, how much ownership meddles in the draft process and who they end up taking?
Concern? I'm counting on it. I'm bracing for the worst, baby. Like, we made this podcast, we made a pact. Like, going and bringing me on, we're not gonna be negative. We're gonna see things from an objective point of view.
You want to talk about playoffs, man?
They left us no choice. They left us no choice. They left us no choice, man. We have to tell how we see it. And, like, I'm counting on them meddling. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide, hey, go get Scoop. Didn't y'all talk about Scoop a couple of years ago? Go find him. They're gonna try to make everything theirs. And you see what's happening with the Saints. They're a team holding on to something 20 years ago, and the first move is getting some guy from 20 years ago for the Pelicans. I have no hope. They have to find hope for me.
Grubb, do you agree with that? Do you think they're gonna you know, stick their finger in the pot?
Well, I mean, it's so much to me in the short term is about what happens in this lottery. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't really influence if they end up with a top 1 or 2 pick. There's no influence there. You know, it's the die has been cast if you end up 1 or 2. Now, if you fall later down and you start thinking about, oh, we want to manage our money, maybe then you start getting that Saints philosophy. We're going to trade back. You know, we're at 8. Let's trade that pick backwards. Let's go.
You're not wrong.
Let's get 2 picks instead of 1, like we did with Jackson and Nikhil. Let's go back 2 picks.
No, Grubb. It's complete opposite.
We got to fill out this roster, right? We got to get rid of some of these vets because they're so expensive. We need some cheaper, younger guys. So let's get cheap and young and bottom this thing out. And again, selling hope, because if you've got more young people for fans to gravitate to and be like, I like this one. Oh, he's going to get some minutes. You want to create more of these Jordan Hawkins myths, more of these Jackson Hayes myths, where all you need is a player to show a flash in a game or two. And I'm starting to gravitate while I'm getting rid of the players you like. Because the more young players I get in, the more cover I have to move on from Trey Murphy, who's going to start being expensive, but to move on from Herb Jones, who's getting older, who already came into the league as an older rookie. Well, I can start moving on from some of these guys you like and say it's all we've got this young wave, and Joe is bringing in the toughness and good decision making, these broad terms that sound great on paper but don't mean anything on the basketball court. I think that there's cover there for the front office, because I think ultimately, like you said, it's when they're pressed up against the salary cap, they don't want to do this every year, because it's not like the NFL where you can play around with the cap and there's no second apron in the NFL. So for the Pelicans, I think they'd like to be a lot safer when it comes to their money and not have to be making mid-season trades to get rid of people. They'd like to walk into the season knowing exactly where their budget is.
So I think all these points are spot on here. I'm gonna play the devil's advocate and say the meddling, it won't be an active meddling. It's already been done. The hiring of Dumars is the meddling. The mandates and the guardrails that you've placed upon him, that's the meddling. And it's going to present itself as the chase for the playoffs and the play-ins. And so with regards to the draft, Bensel, Lauscha, Miss Benson, even Mickey, none of these people are going to be in the draft room. They're not going to talk to the scouts. They're not going to watch, they're not going to be the one on the phone with Silver and be like, this is the guy that we're picking, right? But they will tell Joe, hey, we want to make the playoffs this year. And so if, like you said, 1 and 2, the die has been cast. 3 and 4, I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to trade that pick, right? They're trying to get a more stable commodity. Like, we can't mess around with young players. We got to do the Dell Demps approach. Dell had it right. He was pushing for the playoffs every single year. There was an upward trajectory. We just got unlucky with health. It's going to be this thing of where it's like you value the present so much more than valuing the future. I'm worried it swings way too hard in that direction. Hey, we just had the second worst year of our franchise history. We need tickets to sell. We got to, God forbid they ever entertain any kind of owners that they want to sell to. God forbid that they're going to do that. They're going to try to make this like, hey, this is a respectable, presentable team, like not like a joke at the bottom of the standings. It was made the 8th seed and they played 5 games. Like, this is, you get playoff revenue, I think I'm more worried about that philosophy than them being like, okay, well, gotta pick Ace Bailey because that's the guy that I know. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think where the meddling's happening.
I don't even think that where this franchise, if they made the playoffs or not last couple of years, as that relates to their sale positioning, I don't think it matters on the price in the grand scheme of things. I think they just care about the playoff revenue. Like that's it. They go get your playoff ticket sale money, and whether or not this team did or didn't make the playoffs the last couple of years, we're going to get $3 billion for this organization. Who cares? Who cares? Should be
billion with a B. Crazy.
And there's a chance that they get one and they make the trade that everyone is speculating with having familiarity with the Kings, and it works. And they learn nothing. They learn absolutely nothing. They win 48 games with talented players, and they make the playoffs, and they get their playoff revenue, and they think they're right. And they learn nothing from this. And honestly, that's a worst case scenario for me. That they learn nothing from this.
Like I said, the bar is low. They could very well be a team that makes the playoffs in back-to-back years for the first time since Chris Paul. Like they could be a team that turns into that, and that's how bar the low is.
I mean, there's 10 teams in the conference making the playoff. I mean, like it's you always give there's no way you shouldn't have a shot in this NBA of making the postseason. But I mean, it's like they aspire to be the Hawks. You know what I mean? Like that's where they aspire to be, is the Hawks. It's just like you're constantly. I mean, look at the Griffin era. You never finished, even with the 49 wins, you were 8th. You know what I'm saying? You've never finished higher than 8th in the West. So it's all relative to me. And we talked about this with Griff at the beginning of last season. Was like, yeah, you elevated your win totals, but your position in the West never changed. You were always still fighting to get into the playoffs every year. So yeah, I think that you're right. They're fine with just like what they were with the Saints. They don't care if the Saints go 8-9. If that 8-9 means up until week 17, people think the Saints can make the playoffs. And I think you're right. If they're hanging around 11 and 10 and 9, they're okay with that because they've seen this team make it into the postseason with 36 wins. They've seen this team win 2 playoff games in that series, even though it didn't make any sense when you look at it because Devin Booker and all those things. But yeah, they're good with that. They would absolutely be fine to never win a championship, but give folks that impression of, hey, we could with one more piece, even though that piece will never ever be found, but with one more piece, we could really make a run. They'd be ecstatic.
You said 49 games. I heard 4 playoff gates. I heard four playoff games.
Well,
So you talking about 2 playing
No,
games?
well,
and 2 home.
2 playing games and 2 games in the playoffs. 4 postseason gates. That's what I heard.
They're gonna try to
That's what they
lose.
heard.
We're gonna try to lose the 7-8 game on purpose so they can get their home game.
Wait, Grubb,
win that one.
I'm gonna lob this up to you because I know we've talked about it
I used to
ad
be able to dunk.
nauseum. But the Hawks get to be the Hawks because they're in the East. Why can't the Pelicans do that with their current coach?
Being
Too?
This franchise is just so messed up, man. I think it's how do we want to even phrase this? How do we even want to think about this in this regard? I think that you have to, if you are not committed to being great, if that's not the goal, if every day, and I think that Griff tried to instill that in the Pelicans, and I think that that's what he wanted ultimately was to create a culture of greatness. But yeah, if ownership of ultimately says, whether it's constantly, whether it's by giving away young players or whether it's by not creating a system where you really go all in with something on one idea, I think that you're always going to be mediocre. And I think that this franchise is destined for that with this ownership group. I think I don't want to have to wait for an expansion. I don't want to have to wait for them for expansion, but it feels like that's inevitable at this stage. That the Pelicans are doomed to be what they are. That every year we're going to be back in the situation in one way or another, having the same conversation that we've had, like you said, for 12 years. This is 12 years of this.
The other thing is what they actually can't wait for expansion on is a resolution to the arena stuff. The lease is coming up in 2029. They have to work out an agreement with the state and local governments. And I know there's people that have strong opinions on if taxpayer dollars should fund that or not. I'm not here to get into that specific debate, but that's a battle that they're going to face, and that's something they're going to attempt to do. And it takes, if they decide that they're going to build a new arena from scratch, that takes time. It takes 4, 5, 6 years. In Louisiana, it might take 10. To get something of that magnitude done. The Pelicans did renovations to their practice facility this past summer. It took them till like December to like the players had to like walk around construction actively going on in their practice. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, look, it's and I'm not saying that this is their fault. Like, I understand everyone that's ever had any kind of like contract work done in New Orleans understands the challenge of getting stuff done here, but to build a whole arena like that one is massive. There's a few questions here. Green Slime, I promise we're trying to get to you. It's just been difficult to kind of address all these questions coming in because I feel like there's a lot of ground for us to cover. I think you had asked like what's going to happen to Bryson and Swin. I just want to touch on that one briefly before we get to kind of like let's circle back to the mandate stuff. Bryson, I think the reporting, I think a few local people have reported it. Certainly I've heard this. He's safe if he wants to stay, right? It's a matter of like we discussed earlier on this pod, if he feels like he has the same decision-making capacity, he's going to be empowered to make the same, choices and be in the same role, or if he feels like he has better opportunity elsewhere. Swin, I have not heard any kind of reporting on one way or another. I think typically what ends up happening in these situations when a new executive comes in, they rarely make like outright fires. They tend to let people's contracts run out. And I think a lot of the Pelicans top leadership had contracts aligned with Griff, which are set to expire this next season. So they have one more year. And I think some people in the org have an additional team option associated with that. And so I don't know the exact contract structure with Swin. I would assume that she didn't have a contract longer than Griff had a contract. Likewise, with Bryson, but you never know. You never know. And so I would assume, I don't know what's going to happen with Swin. I can't say that confidently. But
Swin was in Detroit. Swin was in Detroit at the same time that Joe was as well. She played for the Shock while Joe was and those teams
Yep.
were owned by the same folks at that time. So there may be a pre-existing relationship. And I think also the thing for Swin too is we all kind of don't know what she does. And I'm not saying that to, but like she got her promotion last season and we still don't really know what her specific duties are. I'm not saying that she doesn't have them, but I mean, I think that, that having that and having her, the Pelicans have gotten a lot of good publicity from having her in the front office. And she's, gotten a lot of notoriety as a female executive within the league. If she's not a problem, which I haven't seen her be, I would think she's even safer than Bryson, because Bryson is far more of a threat to me as far as if you're bringing in new people than Swin is.
Yeah, really, really, really well said there. Gonna pivot it back to the mandates. I think this question from HUD is keeping Green and trading Zion still the mandate? Look, as far as I have heard, and I hear this routinely, I heard it today, I heard it yesterday, I've heard it since the name Dumars was first even uttered. The conditions of his hire are keeping Willie Green and trading Zion Williamson. That is the situation we're in now. I think there are people in the organization that want this out there, that Dumars wants a chance to connect with Zion, wants a chance to kind of sit down and see. He comes into town next week. He's going to meet with everyone there. He wants a chance to sit, see if they can see eye to eye and then kind of make a decision. Personally, I am skeptical that is going to happen. I feel like a decision's already been made based off how strongly I've heard things, but I'm going to open it up to you guys and be like, my question for you guys is, let's assume for now the default state is this is what ownership wants Joe to execute on when he gets here. Should he even attempt to try to convince him to do anything otherwise?
I wanted to comment that there is no better indication of how unserious this ownership group is than to let something like that get out. Because Grubb, you said it earlier, it diminishes your negotiating position so much to say that that's the mandate. And Dumars can put on a show and say, yeah, we're going to keep Zion as like a negotiating tactic, but it's not going to work. I mean, that's I think the frustrating part is like letting that leak. Not to say that, Schmidt, you don't have the best and most well-placed sources and that you can find out, I'm sure you could find out anything if you wanted to, right? But I feel like just letting that come out is just so wrong and so bad, and shows that they have other priorities and like making this organization great.
So I'll say this. I first heard Dumars' name April 5th. I just looked back. I just went back and saw the text. April 5th. It's 17th, right? It's the 17th right now. It's like 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And to your point, Mason, about like it's kind of sloppy for this information to get out. Like it's played out exactly the way we heard it over like the last couple of weeks. Is like first heard Dumars. I checked around with a couple people and they're like, what? No, really? And then it was some like, no, it can't be real. Like they always just get linked to Dumars, right? Like that's just the default position. And then it was like, oh, Griff is definitely gone, but Dumars' name is still there. And then it was like, oh, it's Dumars. It's Dumars. And along with the Dumars noise, again, April 5th was Willie's here, Zion out. And that's been consistent. Those things have been consistent from that point. But yeah, sorry to steal that. I'd ask the question.
I mean,
push it back.
Schmidt, we talked about this, multiple times, and I told you these numbers. Remember, we talked about the last 13 coaches to win an NBA championship. 11 of them did it in their first 4 years. 11 of the last 13 coaches won their championship within their first 4 years of being. 6 of those were first-time head coaches. All of those 6, 5 of them did it within 3 years. Like, if you don't win quickly in the NBA, you don't win. It's a league of short windows, and the message gets stale fast, even with good coaches, even with winning coaches. And I'm not saying Willie Green is a bad coach. That's for other people to decide. But what I'll say, the results on the court show that you don't have an advantage having Willie Green. You don't have an advantage as a strategist. You don't have an advantage as the type of style that you run. His number one asset to me was communication, right? Like in that first season in particular. And I will contend that the 36-win season was his best job as a coach in just holding that ship together and getting those guys and having the trade and bringing in CJ and putting that team and getting it in position to get into the playoffs. That to me was his best job, but it was a communications job. That's what that was. That wasn't a strategy position. So the last 2 years, what you've seen is whether it's the long extended losing streaks, whether it's the blowouts on a night-to-night basis, like these are unprecedented amounts of blowouts. Whether you can go back to any point in this franchise's history over the last 23 years, they don't lose like this, but they lose like this under Willie Green. The fact that you can't have comeback wins, you have an entire season where you didn't win a game, where you went into the fourth quarter. The fact that you have not had an advantage at home of home court in 4 seasons. The fact that you've had a losing record against the East in 4 seasons. Those are all reasons to me to move past Willie Green. Maybe he'll flourish somewhere else, but there are enough coaches out there for you to start looking into that, and you didn't do that. And then on the part of it with when you look at executives too, like when you talk about or who have traded number 1 picks, where are these teams that have traded their number 1 pick and immediately recover from that? Like you can go back again another 25 years in the NBA's history, and you find when teams lose that number 1 pick, no matter how much they've been frustrated by that player, whether it's you talk about Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz and those disappointments and those types of things, moving on from a number 1 pick rarely makes you better. It rarely makes you better. And when you have a player who gives you an advantage on the court, a player that you cannot replicate, you can go into free agency, you can go into this draft, and there will not be a more impactful player that you can add to the Pelicans roster than a healthy Zion Williamson. To trade him away at 24 years of age and not exhaust every opportunity on a reasonable contract. If he were getting $60 million a year, I might be more inclined to get rid of Zion right now. But at 24, when he's not going to make more than $50 million over the next 3 years, to me, that's just, you are throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Like, I can live with his problems, to me, because even those 25, if I'm getting 25, 30 games of Zion Williamson, that's better to me than 41 home games without a superstar. Because as much as I like Trey Murphy and I see him ascending, nobody's buying tickets to watch Trey Murphy every night. They just won't. It's not going to work that way in New Orleans. And I think that, for as many empty seats as we saw on a night-to-night basis, especially as the season wore on, as we started to see people boo, as we started to see people abandon their season tickets, I think it's just, you're just pouring salt on the earth with this team if you give away your second number 1 pick in less than a decade.
And to like build off of that, I would be far more understanding if the decision to move Zion had a sound process behind it, right? If it was, hey, like, we've done kind of the back channeling, we know there are these 2 or 3 teams that are willing to just, they're going to give us, X, Y, Z. We're going to get a lot of packages, and based off of these packages, we're going to be able to pivot quickly into a rebuild. We're going to get our own top 4 pick this year. We're going to have a nice amount of picks, and we can do something long term. And there's a method to what we're trying to accomplish. But the reality is, the reasoning behind trading Zion Williamson is you're fed up with his off-court actions, right? The most recent headline that Zion, I guess it wasn't even Zion that generated the headline. Like that's like where I kind of take the issue with it. Zion wasn't even mentioned in the police report. He just but that headline, that specific headline with his romantic partners, pissed off Gail Benson, pissed off people in that room, and it's just like, really, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. And I get it. Like, we've all heard stories of Zion not being the professional that he can be. Like, when they suspended him for missing the plane, everybody in the world knew that's not the first time he'd done something like that. Everybody in the world knew that's not the first time he'd been late to practice or done anything like that. Like, and the general reaction was like, oh, why now? Like, he's been going on for years. Understandable, right? Give Dumars the chance to work on that. What I can absolutely see happening is they try to move him, and because this is out there, because he played 30 games, like, no one, there's like, I just can't imagine there being a franchise looking at him, be like, he played 30 games last year, well, let's give you the next 4 first-round picks we have and this promising young player. Like, they're gonna give you one. NBA executive I talked to valued him at a pick and a half. A pick and a half. That's effectively what Brandon Ingram generated you, right? That's effectively what Brandon Ingram generated you, and that's just not sound enough return. And then the other aspect of it is, they not only want to get rid of him, Dumars is never going to have the permission to go into a full rebuild. So you got to turn around and be competitive. So that also limits the kind of packages you move him from for, and that kind of brings us to the kind of package we joked about earlier that Jeremy was joked about, is this idea of Sabonis for Zion. You know, there's a lot of history between these two execs now. Dumars was around when they traded for Sabonis. Dumars selected Darko. You know, like, I'm not trying to draw lines here where they don't need to be drawn, but you know, these are two franchises that are in desperate states, I guess, to change their status quo. And they had disappointing season, and so it's just like, I like the idea of Sabonis next to Zion. I don't like the idea of flipping the guy that can be an all NBA level player for Sabonis, who, like, look, I think he's understated. I think, you know, he probably gets too much flack for, especially like what happened last night. Like, I don't see people like blaming DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and their just lack of a perimeter for their defense. It always falls on Sabonis. It's like, I get it. I get it. But I think the process of it is so backwards that the decision to move Zion doesn't make sense. It's just, if it was from this standpoint of like, look, this is the best basketball move, this is the best strategy move, I would support that. I'd be like, I get it. Look, like, I would like to keep him around. I don't think it's easy to get that kind of talent, but I get it. You know, you're committing to a long-term vision, and it's just I can totally see a world where they don't get the market and they walk back this idea of we got to trade him. They're like, oh yeah, Joe got through to him. He fixed him. He's all he's brought in now.
Yeah, but if you're Zion, then at that point,
you ask out. You ask out next year.
That's some football shit, man. At the end of the day, you are thinking with a basketball NBA mentality, and those motherfuckers are thinking, I don't like this dude. Get him off the roster. That's some
CD
NFL
Deuce.
shit.
He's CD Deuce.
Yeah. At what point does Zion say enough is enough? Like that's, we haven't talked about that. And like, if he keeps hearing all this shit about him, I'd be pissed. Like, get me off this team. And then the Pelicans have almost, you forced their hand, because now you've got ownership wanting to trade him, you've got the player who wants out, and you've got to take a shitty offer to get him off the roster. And that's absolute worst case scenario. But ownership is probably like, okay, whatever, that sucks, but we'll move on.
Worst case scenario is they walk it back. Yeah, I see Justin's comment. That's not even the worst comment we got today about us.
No. We have another one.
We have another one. Okay.
Shout out Michael.
Shout out Michael. Why is Willie staying when players don't support him? His paycheck, Mike. His paycheck is why he's staying.
I'll add to that a little bit, and David, like, feel free to jump in here. But I think we've all heard just how much ownership loves Willie Green, and the qualities that they love about him is that he doesn't rock the boat. He's a man of faith. He doesn't rack up unnecessary fines and headlines. He's someone that they admire for keeping a stable environment while all that Zion stuff has been going on for all these past years. They admire for, you know, it's again, it's not dissimilar to the Dennis Allen thing, where they just don't, like, there's like a hierarchy with how they view players and people in their orgs and people who they trust. And players are often at the bottom of that hierarchy. They trust the people they trust. They're loyal to a fault. And I think, you know, Jay kind of hit on the head. A lot of that loyalty is often tied to what are the financial ramifications of this. But no, I mean, I think, contract aside, they love Willie through and through. And so if someone like Zion is out on Willie, they're going to be like, well, we're going to move Zion anyway, so why does his opinion matter? If someone like Trey and Herb are out on Willie, they're just going to be like, well, these are 23-year-old players, young millionaires. They're finicky. Like, why should we trust them? We trust our judgment. He's our guy. And that's just kind of the mentality that they operate with. But yeah, Grubb,
to me, look at the players. It's like, you know, Herb Jones is never going to make a public stink. Jose Alvarado's a guy who feels like he's every day of the NBA is Christmas for him because he's not supposed to be here, so he's not going to raise a public stink. Zion has shown you that he's really averse to talking in the public. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't enjoy talking with local media, let alone national media. So you're not going to hear a lot from him. So what's interesting to me is like they love these coaches like they did with Alvin at the end of his tenure, where he didn't rock the boat during the Anthony Davis season and throw the organization under the bus, and Willie. But the best success that they've had has been with guys who did rock the boat. Jim Moore was a boat rocker. You know what I'm saying? Jim Haslett was a boat rocker. Sean Payton was a boat rocker. Byron Scott, when he came in obviously that was before the Bensons, but Byron Scott was a guy who came in and had very hard ways and views about how a team should be run. Stan Van Gundy came in and the guy who gives you points, Zion, and started you on the right track defensively. He was a boat rocker. Now, certainly it would be annoying to have Stan walking up and down the hall complaining every day. But if you're trying to get on a road to winning, sometimes that's what you got to have some vinegar. You know what I'm saying? Like everything can't be sweet. So it's like, but you want this because that tells you again is that it's not about winning. It's about everybody getting along. They don't want to hear that stuff from the other side of the hall because they are so focused on trying to figure out what they're doing with the Saints and screwing that up. But they don't need another problem down the hall. Just don't be my problem. They're not looking for a solution. They just don't want any more problems.
Oh man, you hit the nail on the head. And I think that perfectly sums up the Joe Dumars hiring. He is responsible for coming in here and them just handing the basketball operations off to him, and they don't ever want to think about it. They just like, if it gets to us, it's an issue. And I think with Griff around, too many things were getting to them. And naturally, like, because they never trusted Griff from the get-go, like, like, again, I think I said it earlier, like the first interview they had with Griff, the intel that all got out to us was like, man, they think Griff is full of himself. They're probably not going to hire this dude. That was like interview number 1. That wasn't around 2, right? And he ended up being hired, and I don't think that idea of thinking he's too full of himself ever truly went away. And over the years, we constantly heard he thinks he's the smartest man in the room, and too many things over the years just got to the ownership level, like starting from year 1 with Zion, the bubble, all that stuff that happened in the bubble, the piano man. Then, Stan Van Gundy, that whole thing happened. Well, now you got to fire Stan Van Gundy. And then Zion misses the whole next year. Just too many things. And so Dumars is here, so they don't ever have to hear about the Pelicans again, unless it's just like, hey, we won the playoffs. Can you come make a little appearance? Things like that. Appreciate everyone that joined up here. We kind of had a tight timeline for this one. We're supposed to go for 30 minutes, end up going for an hour. So I'm gonna be respectful for everybody's time here. Grubb, appreciate you coming on, man. For everybody, I'm going to be hopping on Grubb's show after the introductory conference next week with Dumars. We'll have so much more to share with you then. And Jay, you want to take us home? Wait. Before you do, Grubb, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can check me out at thebirdrights.com, and then I'm on Blue Sky. I got off that Twitter crack, so yeah. You can check out Blue Sky as well. So, and then Pelicans Daily is also on YouTube as well.
That's right. Griff goes hard in the paint, as some people want to say in the chat. Thank everyone for showing up, all 70 y'all. This was a quick hitter podcast. Hey, we're going to do this on Thursday, and we got it, and we appreciate y'all. Oh God, we appreciate you guys coming along. The chat is going on a crazy stream. Thank you all for showing up. Thank y'all for spending some of my birthday with me.
Happy birthday!
44.
Hey, let's get some happy birthdays in the chat.
Thank y'all for showing up. Continue to like, subscribe, share. If you want your questions asked, there was some comments about us not getting the questions. The best way to get our attention is hit a super chat. If you want your question asked, that is 100% effective rate if you give us a super chat. Thank y'all. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Thank you for the happy birthday wishes in the chat. And we out.